settled the score.
What's going on, Wizards? This is Tony from SPMTG. I'm coming back to y'all with the Eldrazi ramp deck that won the Viewer's Choice selection at the end of my Abzan rally matches. And this is actually going to be a Naya Eldrazi ramp. We have a red and white splash in here, and we'll go over all those when we get there. In the meantime, let's start off with a very crucial and important part of this deck, and that's going to be our mana dorks. We're running, 4 copies of Whisper of the Wilds. This is very, very important for us because he's our 2-drop. He can provide us with 1 or 2 mana later on once we've dropped one of our threats, or flipped Nissa and gotten a 4/4 elemental token off her. Following that up, we've got another playset of mana dorks. We've got 4 copies of Shaman of Forgotten Ways, and he's a really good speed bump at 3 mana. You know, being a 2/3, as well as being able to provide an additional 2 mana consistently and constantly towards our creature spells is really nice, and he's ultimate mana fixing because we are running a few colored creature spells in here, and we'll get to those in just a second. Next up, we've got another speed bump here. We've got 2 copies of Radiant Flames. This helps us out against the Hangerback Walker tokens, Gideon Ally of Zendikar, Sorin Solemn Visitor, Mantis Riders, and a host of other creatures that can be somewhat problematic for us, especially with like the Atarka red decks and red deck wins. They usually end up running some amount of Dragon Fodder and sometimes Hordling Outburst. And just having a way to wipe and reset the board is really useful and really handy. There is a downside that sometimes we'll end up killing like our Whisper of the Wilds or, you know, our Shamans at the same time. But in those matchups where we need the speed bump from this, we really don't mind losing them just because it's going to buy us the time we need to further our game plan and get to the later parts of the game so that we can cast our big, heavy creature spells and whatnot and start advancing our position. Moving along though, we've got another speed bump as well as just an awesome card in general. We've got 2 copies of Nissa Vastwood Seer, and she's going to be a land ramper for us. She'll guarantee us a land drop either the turn we play her, if not the next turn. And as soon as we flip her, which in some matchups we've been able to do as early as turn 5, she'll start providing us with card advantage or that 4/4 elemental token to turn on Whisper of the Wild, so he starts ramping us up for 2 mana instead of 1, and that's really useful. That's really handy. After that, we've got 2 copies of Nissa's Pilgrimage, and this is a fairly interesting card. Like, it's not very impressive when you cast it. You know, it doesn't seem like you see results right away, but getting that 1 extra land into play and guaranteeing a land drop next turn is very useful for this deck, where we just always want to hit our land drops. We want to try and get as many lands into play as quickly as possible as we can so that we can cast our bigger threats, and Nissa's Pilgrimage is something that helps us do that. Granted, we could just be running more copies of Nissa Vastwood Seer, but I feel like with the legendary rule there and everything else, like, we would rather just have something that helps us put a land directly into play, as well as guaranteeing a land drop, or 2, in some cases, if we have the Spell Mastery active on Nissa's Pilgrimage. So, that's why I'm running 2 Nissa's Pilgrimage instead of 4 copies of Nissa Vastwood Seer, but I would not blame anyone for running 4 copies of Nissa Vastwood Seer if they have the money. Next up, we're going to move right into our 4-drop slot. We've got 4 copies of Hedron Archive, and this card does all the things for us. It helps us ramp mana by 2 colorless, which is fine because we have plenty of basics and colored mana in our land base to go around. Shaman also provides some colored mana assistance for the few colored creatures that we do run. So all the way around and in general, Hedron Archive is just really good. You know, late game we can sack it and draw some cards and dig for more gas, and that's always nice. After that, we've got 2 copies of Explosive Vegetation, and it's basically another 2 copies of Hedron Archive because we can't play 5 or 6 of them, even though we want to. It's going to help us ramp 2 lands, sometimes flip Nissa early, or just help us flip Nissa in general if we've already played a land drop for the turn and we happen to have 4 extra mana somewhere, which isn't terribly hard for us to do between Whisper of the Wilds, Hedron Archive, and the other land ramp in Nissa's Pilgrimage. After that, we've got our 6-drop. We're going to skip 5 and go right to 6, because that's where all the big, meaty, heavy creatures come in that start doing a lot of work for us. We've got 4 copies of Oblivion Sower. This is great because it's a 5/8 body that lets us keep the shields up, as well as taking away 4 options from our opponent, or ramping our mana, like one of the two, if not both, all at the same time, against a lot of mid-range and control decks that you're usually running some delve spells, and we can usually get a few lands off of that because they've delved away those land cards first, and that's very useful for us. On top of that, against control decks and other mid-range decks, they're usually a little bit mana heavy, especially in this current format, so we have a better chance of hitting more lands off Oblivion Sower. And even if we whiff on the land, being able to take away 4 cards from our opponent and just say they don't have access to them anymore is really useful, especially in control matchups or any deck that runs counter magic for that matter, because we're going to get this every time we cast an Oblivion Sower, not just from it entering the battlefield, and that's very handy, very useful. We have 2 copies of Dragonlord Dramoka because it's very useful for us in the aggro matchup in Game 1, as well as the control matchup being uncounterable and making all their spells sorcery speed. Let's move into the 7-drop slot. We've got 2 copies of Dragonlord Atarka because against the mid-range decks and some control decks, Dragonlord Atarka is very useful for that 5 damage enter the battlefield effect. At the same time, he can still be useful against aggro. We've got 1 copy of Nissa's Revelation because we've kind of stacked the deck to where this is going to be a green Sphinx's Revelation for us. We're always going to be able to draw, somewhere around 5 cards, if not more, and gain, 7 or more life off of it. So that's really, really awesome when we play it. If this resolves against any deck, it usually just says we win the game. Moving on though, we've got our 8-drop slot. We've got 2 Ugins. We could be running 3 Ugins, but we're only running the 2 because he doesn't hit a couple of things that are very threatening for us, like manifest tokens and morphs, as well as other Eldrazi. But at the same time, he does let our Eldrazi and artifacts survive his exile wipe, and at the same time he doesn't hit Thopter tokens and Hangerback Walkers, and that's the other big problem with him. Aside from that, he's an all-star in this deck. He's pretty much an auto-include because of how much mana production we have, and he's a win condition by himself. We've been playing with Ugin for a while. Last but not least, we have the Big Daddy himself. We've got 3 copies of Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, and he is just fantastic. In this standard format, as long as we can hardcast him, he's very much OP. Even if control decks manage to have the counterspell to counter him, we're still going to get the double exile trigger off of him, and if they can't, then he's just very hard for them to deal with because he's an indestructible 10/10. If we get 1 attacking with him, they'll usually scoop. So yeah, that's the deck. We've got 4 copies of Canopy Vista and 4 copies of Cinderglade to support our white and red splash throughout the deck, as well as 8 forests because we have a bunch of land rampers, and they all, 4 of which, Nissa Vastwood Seer and Nissa's Pilgrimage, both require basic forests, so we have to make sure we have enough to be able to fetch all of those reliably and consistently. We also have 1 mountain and 1 plains, giving us a basic mana foundation for the red and white splash. After that, we've got 4 copies of Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, and this is really useful and an all-star land in our deck, honestly. We can usually get up to 7 mana fairly consistently and reliably, and as soon as we hit 7 lands, this becomes active for us to cast our Cuddle spells more effectively. Last Currently, for the mana base, we've got 4 fetch lands. We're running 2 Windswept Heath and 2 Wooded Foothills. We don't want to thin our deck too much on lands with fetch lands, because we have our Explosive Vegetation and Nissa's Pilgrimage and Nissa Vastwood Seer to help do that for us. So that's why we have a somewhat limited fetch base. Moving right along though, we've got our sideboard. We've got 4 copies of Hangerback Walker. It's very useful for us in the aggro matchup, being a creature that replaces itself. And sometimes in the mid-range matchup as well, depending on what deck we're going up against. But a lot of the times, this just doesn't do what we want or need it to do, so that's why it's not in the main. For further help against the aggro matchup, because Atarka Red is one of the biggest decks that I had to playtest against for a while, just to try and see if there was a way we could make this deck stand up to it because of how fast that deck is. We ended up having to have a lot of hate for those aggro decks. So we've got 2 copies of Irration Cleric to help with that as a chump block, as well as gain 3 life. Fairly standard sideboard tech if you're in white and need some aggro help. We also have 2 copies of Surge of Righteousness, because we can take out like Kolaghan, the Storm's Fury, I want to say is the non-Dragonlord version of Kolaghan that we see in some Mardu decks and some of the like 4 and 5 color zoo decks that have been going around, as well as being able to take out Anafenzas and Rhinos and every creature in the green-red, in the Atarka Red, as well as red deck wins. We also have 2 additional copies of Radiant Flames for those aggro matchups, so that we can continue to lower our curve and have some sweepers to take out as many of their creatures as we can. And we can usually cast this for 3 damage reliably, consistently, all the time, and it works wonders. It's very nice. After that, we've got 2 additional copies of Dragonlord Dromoka. This is also for the aggro matchup to help lower the curve and ensure that we have a way to block and gain life at the same time, as well as the control matchup, since it can't be countered, and again is just a nice flying threat with lifelink to help us stall the game out and go longer. After that, we've got a 3rd copy of Dragonlord Atarka, which is again Atarka. We play this 3rd copy for mostly mid-range and sometimes the aggro matchups. Being able to drop like our Ugins and Ulamogs and putting in extra Dragonlord Atarkas and Dromokas and all these extra like white and red spells here still helps us out a great deal in the aggro matchup, because we're not caring so much about the mana ramp that we get from, say, Oblivion Sower and Hedron Archives and Explosive Vegetations, as we are about trying to stall the game out to get to our Dromokas and Atarkas to start being proactive in those matchups. We also have 2 copies of Gaia's Revenge, because against like Esper Control, which is a thing this standard, it has pretty much pseudo hexproof, and the only thing they have to get rid of it is going to be Foul Tongue Invocation. Maybe they're splashing red and have Crackling Dooms. But aside from that, they just don't have a way to really deal with Gaia's Revenge aside from trading with it. So, all the way around, Gaia's Revenge is something that helps us out and is very solid for the deck in those matchups. And that is the deck tech. My wizards are wizards. I hope y'all enjoyed. If y'all did, please give me a like, share, leave me some comments, you know. I don't want to let down my Teamer Elemental fans. I had a few of you that watched the Abzan Rally matches all the way to the finish and voted for the Teamer Elementals, so I'm going to be bringing y'all some gameplay footage with that deck, which I'll do like a short 5-minute deck tech at the beginning of those, just to run through and give you guys a basic idea of what the deck's trying to do. And after that, we'll do, you know, 2 or 3 matches worth of gameplay footage, and I'll probably have another sorry, tongue-tied. I'll have another viewer's choice for my next set of deck tech videos and gameplay footage. And I'll catch y'all later, wizards. This is Tony. Peace out.